pulled the gun to scare him off. And the gun, in reality, what really happened, the gun went off. And it hit the boy in the head.
Country music isn't just about front porch guitars and emotional songs. Behind the scenes, there's a long history of fights, scandals, and short tempers. Some of the same fiery personalities that gave us unforgettable songs also stirred up plenty of trouble. Join us as we reveal 21 country stars who are known for acting like jerks. Let's start with Johnny Paycheck.
You can take this job and shove it.
Johnny Paycheck built his reputation on outlaw bravado. With his gruff voice and his anthem, "Take This Job and Shove It," he became a blue-collar hero. But behind the music was a man consumed by rage and recklessness. Paycheck was notorious for violence. He pulled guns on promoters, started bar fights, and in 1985 shot a man in the head during an argument in Ohio. The victim survived, but Paycheck landed in prison, solidifying his reputation as a dangerous hothead. On the road, he was nearly impossible to manage. He showed up late, berated band members, and let drugs and alcohol dictate his behavior. What fans saw as outlaw authenticity, insiders recognized as volatility. Later in life, he turned to religion and tried to reform, but the damage had been done. His outlaw image may have sold records, but his violent streak, arrogance, and unpredictable behavior made him one of country music's most notorious jerks. Coming up next is Kinky Friedman. Kinky Friedman made his mark as both a satirist and a country performer, fronting the Texas Jew Boys in the 1970s. His biting wit and politically incorrect humor won him a cult following, but also branded him one of the most abrasive figures in the business. Friedman thrived on controversy. His jokes pushed boundaries, often mocking groups and individuals in ways many found offensive. Fans laughed, but plenty of peers found his humor cruel and arrogant. He carried that edge into interviews, belittling Nashville artists he considered inauthentic and dismissing the industry as a town full of hacks. His arrogance made enemies, and his interest in shock value often outweighed any effort to build genuine connections. In later years, Friedman ran for political office in Texas, delivering the same caustic remarks he once hurled from the stage. His campaigns often seemed more like performance art than serious efforts, further cementing his reputation as a provocateur. To some, Kinky Friedman will always be remembered as a sharp-tongued satirist. To others, he was just another loudmouth who mistook cruelty for comedy. Either way, he earned his spot among country's biggest jerks. Up next, we have Gary Allan.
Drink and laugh with your friends like it's nothing.
Gary Allan rose in the late 1990s with hits like Her Man and Nothing On But the Radio, praised for his voice and authenticity. But away from the stage, he developed a reputation as one of Nashville's most combative personalities. Allan's interviews often turned hostile. He bristled at questions, mocked peers, and blasted the Nashville machine as fake, despite his own career thriving within it. His arrogance rubbed many the wrong way, making him appear hypocritical and bitter. On the road, his temper followed him. Promoters complained about difficult demands and uncooperative behavior, while fans sometimes left meet and greets disappointed by his cold, dismissive attitude. Stories of him snapping at handlers or bandmates became common, adding to his image as a man nearly impossible to please. To his credit, Allan endured personal tragedy, most notably the 2004 suicide of his wife, a loss that shaped his music and outlook. But rather than softening him, the grief often hardened his edges. His artistry remains respected, but his sharp tongue and hostility left scars. Gary Allan will be remembered as a talent, but also as one of the most notoriously difficult figures in country music. Following that, we have Toby Keith. Toby Keith became a 2000 superstar with songs like Courtesy of the Red, White and Blue, but his brash persona made him a polarizing figure. Loved by some, hated by others, he often came across as more bully than entertainer. His infamous feud with the Dixie Chicks defined his jerk reputation. After Natalie Maines criticized President George W. Bush, Keith retaliated by mocking her with doctored images on stage, fueling one of the nastiest spats in country history. Fans either cheered him as patriotic or condemned him as cruel. Behind the scenes, he wasn't easier to handle. Promoters described him as stubborn and combative, while peers said he had little patience for compromise. In interviews, his bluntness often veered into arrogance, and he seemed to relish the image of Nashville's resident tough guy. Despite his controversies, Keith dominated radio and stadiums. His fans embraced his swagger, while his critics saw him as proof that arrogance sells. Toby Keith's legacy is complicated, a commercial giant whose cocky bravado helped him climb to the top, but also secured him a permanent spot among country music's biggest jerks. Moving along, Tanya Tucker.
While she walks downtown with a suitcase.
Tanya Tucker stunned the industry at just 13 with Delta Dawn, hailed as a prodigy with endless promise. But as she grew up, her wild behavior and fiery temper often overshadowed her extraordinary talent. Through the 1970s and 80s, Tanya became tabloid gold. Her high-profile romances with Glenn Campbell and Merle Haggard drew headlines, while her substance abuse struggles fueled stories of chaos. She became notorious for showing up late, walking off stages, or exploding at management. Insiders described her as brilliant, but impossible to handle. Tucker herself admitted her mouth often got her in trouble, and her reckless behavior made her a nightmare for promoters and handlers. Fights with bandmates and public feuds only cemented her reputation. Despite it all, Tanya proved resilient. She staged multiple comebacks, eventually earning a Grammy in 2020 for While I'm Livin'. Still, the scars of her earlier antics remain part of her story. For many, Tanya Tucker embodies both sides of stardom, a trailblazer with unmatched grit and a volatile personality who left chaos in her wake. Continuing on, Travis Tritt. Travis Tritt carved his own lane in the 1990s, blending southern rock swagger with country authenticity. His hits made him a star, but his sharp tongue and bad temper gave him a reputation as one of Nashville's most difficult artists. Tritt relished in being blunt. He dismissed other performers as not real musicians, mocked journalists, and openly feuded with fellow stars. His spat with Billy Ray Cyrus, where he ridiculed achy, breaky heart as frivolous fluff, branded him as arrogant and mean-spirited. His behavior offstage matched the attitude. Tales of him cursing out crew members, storming off tours, and clashing with management spread quickly. Fans who met him at signings often described him as cold or dismissive, far from the charm his songs projected. To Tritt, it was honesty. He never wanted to play the fake nice Nashville game. But to others, it was arrogance, pure and simple. Though his music left an impact, his combative personality secured him a reputation not just as an outlaw, but as one of country's most notorious jerks. Now let's turn to Hank Williams Jr. Hank Williams Jr. emerged from his father's shadow in the 1980s, creating his own outlaw identity with hits like Family Tradition. But his fiery personality and combative views often left him branded as one of Nashville's most divisive stars. Known for explosive interviews, Hank Jr. lashed out at critics and journalists, often in crude or aggressive ways. His image as a defiant outlaw thrilled fans, but his arrogance alienated others. His infamous 2011 television appearance, where he compared President Barack Obama to Adolf Hitler, led to ESPN cutting ties with him after decades of using his Monday Night Football theme. Instead of apologizing, Hank doubled down, claiming censorship. Behind the scenes, colleagues described him as unpredictable, with a short fuse and little tolerance for criticism. While many fans embraced him as authentic, others saw only arrogance and cruelty beneath the bravado. For all his controversy, Hank Jr. remains a country institution. But his legacy will always be marked not just by his music, but by the arrogance and hostility that defined much of his career. Another name you need to hear, LeAnn Rimes. LeAnn Rimes became a star at 13 with Blue, hailed as the next Patsy Cline. But her image shifted from prodigy to tabloid magnate, with scandals and arrogance clouding her career. Her very public affair with Eddie Cibrian in 2009, which broke up both their marriages, fueled a media firestorm. Instead of laying low, Rimes often overshared on social media, with critics calling her immature and insensitive. But her personal life wasn't the only factor. Industry insiders described her as entitled and difficult to work with. Even as her chart dominance faded, she feuded openly with other celebrities, including Brandi Glanville, dragging personal disputes into the spotlight. Though her voice remains powerful, the controversies have outshined her music for years. Rimes has worked to rebuild her image, but her reputation for arrogance and selfishness lingers. From child prodigy to cautionary tale, LeAnn Rimes' story proves how quickly ego and recklessness can overshadow even the brightest career. Next on the list is Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard's story is legendary, a prison inmate turned poet of the working man, with songs like Okie from Muskogee and Mama Tried. But behind his genius was a man whose stubbornness and sharp tongue earned him as many enemies as fans. Haggard prided himself on brutal honesty. He mocked hippies, scoffed at anti-war protesters, and later dismissed modern country stars as unworthy of the tradition. His criticism often came off less like honesty and more like arrogance. Band members recalled his volatile moods, with Haggard quick to lash out or fire people without warning. Promoters called him demanding, and fellow artists admitted they avoided working with him because of his unpredictable behavior. He admitted prison left him hardened, and his distrust often turned into cruelty. Fans adored his authenticity, but those who worked with him often saw only the difficult side. Merle Haggard left behind one of the richest catalogs in country history, but also a reputation as a man whose genius was rivaled only by his stubborn, sometimes jerkish streak. Moving along, Faith Hill. Faith Hill became one of country's biggest crossover stars with Breathe and This Kiss, admired for her voice and glamour, but her flawless image cracked with flashes of arrogance and diva-like behavior. Her most infamous moment came at the 2006 CMA Awards when Carrie Underwood won Female Vocalist of the Year. Backstage cameras caught Hill throwing up her hands in apparent outrage. Though she later claimed it was a joke, fans weren't convinced. The clip went viral, and Hill's image as sweet and gracious took a hit. Rumors of backstage demands and cold treatment of fellow stars only fueled the perception. Some insiders described her as perfectionistic and sharp-tempered, more focused on control than camaraderie. Even her marriage to Tim McGraw was painted as occasionally turbulent, with gossip pointing to jealousy and tension. Hill remains one of the most successful female stars of her generation, but for many, that CMA outburst cemented the reality. Even the sweetest voice in Nashville could act like a jerk. Continuing on, Kenny Chesney. Kenny Chesney built his empire on laid-back beach anthems and stadium-sized shows, becoming the poster boy for No Shoes Nation. But his guarded personality and occasional arrogance made him one of Nashville's coldest stars. His brief 2005 marriage to Renee Zellweger, annulled after 4 months, sparked tabloid frenzy when she cited fraud as the reason. Instead of clarifying, Chesney bristled at speculation, lashing out at the media and frustrating fans who expected transparency. Chesney also developed a reputation for being standoffish. Unlike many stars who embraced interviews and fan interactions, he often avoided press or responded with hostility to personal questions. Some critics argued his everyman persona was just a crafted mask, hiding a much more distant figure. Even within the industry, Chesney's reputation for focusing on his brand over collaboration alienated some peers. Fans noticed the disconnect, questioning how someone who sang about intimacy could seem so detached in real life. Despite his hits and stadium tours, Chesney's aloofness left a mark. For many, he wasn't the approachable beach cowboy his songs portrayed, but rather one of Nashville's biggest jerks. Now let's turn to Wynonna Judd. Wynonna Judd became a star alongside her mother Naomi as half of the Judds, and later as a powerhouse solo artist. But her fiery temper and messy personal life earned her a reputation as one of the most difficult figures in country. Her volatile relationship with Naomi spilled into the public eye, with their on-stage feuds and off-stage fights making headlines. Colleagues described Wynonna as brilliant but exhausting to work with, prone to emotional outbursts that left others drained. Her personal life added to the drama. Her DUI arrest in 2003, weight struggles, and chaotic marriages kept her in tabloids for years. The arrest of her husband, D.R. Roach, for sexual assault of a minor only deepened the cloud of scandal. Even her fans sometimes felt her coldness, with Wynonna herself admitting she could come across as standoffish or blunt. Her honesty, while refreshing to some, often bordered on arrogance. For all her flaws, Wynonna's voice and resilience remain undeniable. But her jerkish streak, both in her personal chaos and her combative demeanor, ensures her reputation is as complicated as her music is powerful. Coming up next is Garth Brooks.
Strange situations.
Garth Brooks redefined country in the 1990s, selling more records than any solo artist in history. But his massive ego and control issues made him one of Nashville's most controversial stars. In the early 2000s, Brooks forced stores to sell his albums exclusively through Walmart, angering small retailers. He also resisted streaming, holding his music hostage until services bent to his demands. For many, Brooks wasn't just ambitious, he was power-hungry. His bizarre Chris Gaines alter ego in 1999 only fueled criticism. Fans and critics were baffled, and instead of laughing at himself, Brooks doubled down, insisting on treating the flop seriously. It became a symbol of his oversized ego. Industry insiders whispered about his difficult nature, with fellow artists saying he was demanding and prone to lecturing audiences instead of entertaining them. Brooks's legacy as a performer is undeniable. He brought country to arenas worldwide, but his controlling streak and unchecked ego secured him a spot among the genre's biggest jerks. Following that, we have Reba McEntire. Reba McEntire is the queen of country, celebrated for her success and longevity. But behind her smile lies a ruthless competitor whose ambitions sometimes came across as arrogance. Bandmates and managers spoke of her perfectionism and temper, with Reba quick to fire those who didn't meet her standards. Even her marriage to manager Narvel Blackstock fueled talk that she mixed business and personal life in ways that alienated those around her. Her competitiveness with other female stars also drew criticism. Rivals described her as dismissive and cold, fiercely guarding her throne as country's top woman. At award shows, her sharp glances and icy demeanor became a point of gossip. Even fans caught glimpses of her bluntness. In interviews, Reba often criticized artists who strayed from tradition, coming off as judgmental and harsh. Her empire-building instincts earned respect, but also fear. For many in Nashville, Reba wasn't just a queen. She ruled with an iron fist. Next on the list is Alan Jackson.
Ain't leaving me look easy.
Alan Jackson built his career on honoring country traditions, with hits like Chattahoochee and Remember When. But his stubbornness and occasional arrogance created plenty of enemies along the way. At the 1999 CMA Awards, producers asked him to shorten his performance. In protest, Jackson stopped mid-song and played George Jones's Choices before storming off. Fans saw rebellion. Insiders saw ego-driven grandstanding. Jackson frequently criticized the rise of pop country in the 2000s, mocking artists like Shania Twain as diluting the genre. While many agreed, others saw his dismissive tone as arrogant and bitter, especially since he was still dominating charts. Even fans sometimes found him standoffish. Jackson's private nature often came across as cold at meet and greets, making him seem aloof. For all his timeless music, Alan Jackson's refusal to bend and his dismissive attitude toward others cemented his place among country's biggest jerks. Up next, Willie Nelson.
Goes down.
Willie Nelson is one of country's most beloved icons, but his freewheeling ways often left chaos in their wake. Nelson's personal life was marked by infidelity and fractured marriages. His second wife discovered he had secretly fathered a child with another woman, only after finding the baby's birth announcement mixed in with their bills. His finances were just as reckless. Nelson's IRS scandal in the early 1990s, when he owed $16 million in back taxes, wasn't just bad luck. Critics accused him of ignoring advice and letting carelessness spiral into disaster. Bandmates and collaborators also described Nelson as unpredictable, sometimes more interested in gambling or marijuana than his work. His laid-back image charmed fans, but insiders often saw selfishness and a lack of accountability. Nelson's songs and activism earned him sainthood in country lore, but behind the charm was a man whose selfish streak made life with him difficult. Now let's turn to George Jones. George Jones was one of the greatest voices in country history, but also one of its biggest wrecks. His alcoholism made him notoriously unreliable, earning him the nickname No-Show Jones. Fans and promoters alike lost faith after countless missed concerts. His marriage to Tammy Wynette was legendary for its chaos. She accused him of abuse, claiming he once chased her with a loaded gun. Their constant battles defined tabloids for years. Jones's cruelty extended beyond relationships. Friends and bandmates described him as manipulative and dismissive, especially during his worst binges. Even when sober, he relapsed repeatedly, breaking trust over and over. Though Jones redeemed himself later, his reckless selfishness scarred everyone around him. His voice was a gift, but his behavior secured him a spot on this list. Another name you need to hear, Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton is a global treasure, known for her songs, philanthropy, and charm. But beneath the rhinestones lies a fiercely ambitious woman whose actions sometimes branded her as ruthless. Her split with mentor Porter Wagoner became one of country's ugliest feuds. Wagoner accused her of betrayal and arrogance, claiming she used him to launch her career before discarding him. Their legal battles dragged on for years, tarnishing both reputations. Parton has also been described as controlling, with every detail of her brand tightly managed. Former collaborators recalled her as demanding and quick to cut ties with anyone who threatened her image. Her kindness is legendary, but Dolly's iron will reveals another truth. Behind the sweet smile is a businesswoman who sometimes acted like a jerk to stay on top. Moving along, Waylon Jennings. Waylon Jennings defined outlaw country with hits like Lookin' Bach, Texas, but his hard-living ways made him as infamous as he was beloved. His cocaine addiction in the 1970s drained his finances and destroyed his relationships. Bandmates recalled terrifying tirades when things didn't go his way. Jennings ruled with fear, often humiliating those closest to him. He admitted to being a terrible husband and father, prioritizing vices over family. At times, he abandoned tours altogether, leaving promoters and fans stranded. Waylon's charisma and talent saved him time and again, but for those who lived through his darkest days, he wasn't just an outlaw, he was a jerk whose arrogance left scars. Continuing on, Loretta Lynn. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter, was a fearless trailblazer, but her blunt honesty often crossed into arrogance and judgment. She feuded publicly with fellow artists, criticizing women she thought were too Hollywood. Her combative marriage to Doolittle Lynn became legendary for its violence and drama, with Loretta once smashing a vase over his head. Her traditional views also alienated younger stars, with her blunt takes on gender roles and politics often sparking backlash. Loretta Lynn was a hero to many, but to others, her sharp tongue and refusal to bend made her one of country's biggest jerks. And finally, Hank Williams I. Hank Williams Sr. wrote timeless songs like Your Cheatin' Heart and I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, but the man behind the music was often cruel and destructive. His alcoholism made him notoriously unreliable, missing shows and alienating fans. Nashville executives branded him difficult, and his arrogance burned bridges with managers. His marriage to Audrey Williams was volatile, marked by fights, womanizing, and neglect. Friends described him as selfish, disappearing on benders for days. Williams died at just 29, his genius cut short by his demons. His music is immortal, but his reckless arrogance left chaos behind, securing him the #1 spot on this list. Which of these country legends do you think was the biggest jerk? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from country music's hidden past. And before you go, check out the other videos on your screen. You won't want to miss them.